And if you believe it's going to go wrong, you'll get an environment, you'll get a reality that looks like things are going wrong, but that's going right because you're getting what you focus on. So if you don't want to end up in the future probable reality where things are going wrong on whatever subject it is you're thinking about, I suggest you change your thinking, and then seemingly like magic, it's not magic, but seemingly like magic, you'll end up in a probable future reality where everything's going right. Welcome to another episode of AI and Spirit. This is the series of my Positively Focused YouTube channel where I talk about the convergence that is occurring between technology and spirituality. This is the moment in human existence where we're moving through what's called the technological singularity, which is actually a spiritual inflection. It's a moment in time where you, me, and everyone else on the planet have come together to witness a monumental shifting of human consciousness, a shifting into a reality in which we are able to free ourselves from beliefs that have limited what is possible for humanity, and as a result of that, expand into a greater awareness of all that we are as pure, positive energy beings. And in this episode, I want to try something new. Every week on Monday, my version of Claude and ChatGPT both produce a positively focused weekly brief. It is a report that each AI produces where it goes out and grabs headlines and other information on the technological singularity viewed from the positively focused lens. So I've trained both of these artificial intelligence platforms to perceive the world through positively focused, the fundamental spiritual principles underlying how physical reality works. And so they return these reports to me. And a couple of weeks ago, I was looking at these reports and I was thinking, wow, this is pretty good information I could share, especially the interpretation that is being given as these AI platforms look at the news through the positively focused lens. So today, I want to report or share, this is not a report, I want to share the perspective that the AI has given me relative to 3 bits of news that came out viewed from the positively focused lens so that you can have a better understanding of, number one, how the positively focused framework works in terms of interpreting the news. And number two, you can have a better understanding of what's going on behind the scenes of the news as it comes out. And then number 3, so that you can perhaps train yourself to perceive the news as it unfolds in a way that is most conducive to your spiritual expansion. So let's get started. So the 3 stories I want to talk about from my positively focused morning brief from last week. Is that right? Yeah. Last week, August, I think it's the 3rd through the 10th. The 3 stories I want to talk about are an event that happened at a BMW plant in Spartanburg relative to humanoid robot implementation, a $9 billion IPO that happened in China, and a letter that Bernie Sanders sent to the leading frontier lab CEOs. All of these stories indicate progress and contrast with regard to what's happening in the technological singularity, which is a spiritual reflection. Each of these bits of news are giving you an experience of the deliberate, expansionary unfolding of this technological singularity. And if you see it through the positively focused lens, then you're able to feel encouraged and enthusiastic about what's happening instead of fearful and insecure. In fact, 2 weeks ago in my positively focused brief, there was a story, I'm not going to cover it extensively here, but a story that talked about how the amount of fear that the general public in the United States is feeling around AI has increased significantly as people have engaged more with artificial intelligence, and as a result of engaging more, they understand that jobs are at risk. And so This is really, really good what's happening. Let's, my sound levels are kind of high. When I get excited, my sound levels go off the chart. So I want to fix that. Okay, let's take a look at these stories. So the first story is the story out of Spartanburg at the BMW plant there, where Figure AI, a robot maker, one of the leading ones actually in the United States anyway, has implemented embedded AI, humanoid robots, in the Spartanburg BMW plant. And the BMW Vice President for Logistics, Ulrich Weiland, was holding a press conference in the Spartanburg plant where he had these robots on display. And one of the reporters had described what the robots were doing. The robots were lifting parts from a box, turning around, setting the parts in a cart, and then pulling the cart to where the parts could be used to assemble vehicles. So it was basically basic material handling. And one of the reporters who was observing this happening described what he saw with these robots moving around. He described it as an employee who had come to work with a massive hangover from the week before. The robot was moving very, very slow and very, very deliberate, not at all like a human being. And Ulrich Weiland, the VP, said, and I'm quoting here, "They're still slower than humans, but they're advancing fast." Now, this is really interesting because what's happening here is, and this totally reflects the positively focused framework. What's happening here is Weiland is accepting the current state of technology, humanoid robots, while at the same time seeing the potential, the promise of it. And so BMW is doubling down on their use of humanoid robots, which is why they're having this press conference in their factory. So the positively focused framework, with regard to your own expansion into what you're wanting, the positively focused framework posits that you first have to accept whatever's going on in your what is. Only then, when you're not resisting what is, can you expand into something more than what you currently have. That's what this vice president at BMW is doing. He's accepting the fact that at the moment, robots appear to be less productive than human beings, but he can see the potential. And as a result of this is so good, he can perceive a future probable reality in which human beings, in which robots are moving just as efficiently as human beings. And so he's mentally, I would say also spiritually, leading in the direction of that future probability, which is why he's doubling down on Figure AI's robots in the Spartanburg plant. So here we have this vice president, and he's not the only one, by the way. Hyundai, the owner, I think they're the owner of Boston Dynamics, Mercedes, and of course Tesla are all planning to or are doing their versions of what BMW is doing in Spartanburg. In fact, pretty much every major automobile manufacturer is looking at implementing some form of robotics inside their plant. Now, it should be acknowledged that there already are robots in many of these automotive plants, but we're talking about humanoid robots or other form factors that have autonomous mobility. And so what we have with this BMW plant is an example where a business leader, the vice president of logistics, is amplifying his own commitment to a future in which robots play a significant role in their factory, even though currently their abilities are less capable than human beings. It's so good. Now, the second story I want to talk about is a story out of China. This is so amazing, actually. So while we're here in the United States having a large conversation about whether humanoid robots should replace human beings. And by the way, there was a congressional hearing, I believe it was earlier this year, where an economist from Case Western, Susan Helper, gave a very long testimony about the nature of humanoid robots and their ability to replace human labor and whether or not that's even feasible. And this testimony that she gave, I'm going to get back to the Chinese thing in a second. The testimony that she gave was really interesting because what I interpreted that testimony, I did read through the entire testimony, and what I interpreted that testimony as saying is, hang on a minute, we have to preserve human labor. And so let's create an environment in which human labor can be augmented by humanoid robots rather than having humanoid robots completely replace human labor. And I don't blame Susan, the economist, Susan Helper, for her perspective of wanting to preserve human labor. She's an economist, and it's in her best interest as an economist to do and say exactly what she's doing and saying, which is trying to preserve human labor. And so what we're seeing here, it's so good. What we're seeing here are the dynamics playing between the future probable reality where it's basically the Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Dario Amodei future, where human beings are no longer having to work. We're seeing the dynamic between that and the current paradigm trying to defend itself from this. And that's what Susan Helper is trying to do. She's seeing the writing on the wall, as is Ulrich Weiland, the vice president of BMW. She's seeing the writing on the wall, and instead of doubling down on the Elon Musk future, like Weiland is, wanting to embrace humanoid robots in his factory, Susan is trying to defend the current status quo in her testimony. And so she's arguing. Now, it's interesting because she's not saying humanoid robots should not be implemented at all. She can't say that because the momentum is too strong relative to the embracing of humanoid robots, as you're going to see when I talk about this China story. She can't buck the momentum of the future that's coming, the future that's seen by Elon Musk and Dario Amodei and Sam Altman and all the other Frontier Lab leaders. She can't buck that momentum. So she's trying to, it's almost like she's going through the 4 stages of grief. It's like economists are going through the 4 stages of grief. They're like trying to negotiate a probable future reality that is close to this one, but not quite that one that totally disrupts human labor. Meanwhile, the powerful companies that are running AI, soon to be embedded AI, want that probable future where there is no human labor. And so her testimony was all about trying to find a balance between humanoid robot implementation and preserving human labor. So it was really interesting to read that testimony in the context of this other story that came out, which was the Unitree IPO. So Unitree is a company in China that has made tremendous progress with its humanoid robot production. They have successfully produced 18,000 humanoid robots. Produced, not ordered, not pre-ordered, produced 18,000 humanoid robots. And they are out doing things in the Chinese markets and the Chinese industrial centers. So Unitree came out with its IPO last week, and when it went public on the Chinese stock market, it raised $900 million. Not only that, but there are reports that the IPO was oversubscribed. Retail investors wanted to purchase up to 8,000x the amount of shares that were available for purchase in the IPO. Now, this is really extraordinary. Here we are in the United States. We are barely getting to the point of mass production with regard to humanoid robots. And China is literally kicking our butt relative to that. And it's interesting because of China's success and some national security concerns, the United States has banned humanoid robots coming out of China. So China's going to have to go elsewhere to market all of these robots it's creating, but it's already having significant success in its own country. Significant success. So what I see interesting from a positively focused perspective is that Unitree, and by the way, Unitree is not the only robot manufacturer in China. So there are others out there in China that are producing their own versions of the volume that Unitree is producing, although their volume is nowhere near what Unitree has been able to produce as far as specifically humanoid robots are concerned. So from a positively focused perspective, what we're seeing is the contrast being presented to United States companies in the form of Unitree being so far out in front of American robot manufacturers. And at the same time, we're seeing the contrast of China outpacing the United States relative to humanoid robot production and implementation. Now, because of the structure of government that China has, they're much more quickly able to implement changes in their country than in the United States, where we have democracy, which tends to slow things down. And this is why we're seeing China be so successful and Unitree being so productive with regard to creating humanoid robots. But one of the things I wanted to show you from this Susan Helper testimony was a graph that she has in her testimony, which was really astounding. I did not realize this, but if you look at this graph, if you look at the Asian countries, I believe it's Korea and China have far, far, far more humanoid robots in the field actually working per, I think it's per 10,000 or it might be per 1,000 human beings. So the Asian countries are really outpacing the Western world relative to the implementation of humanoid robots. Now, of course, if you follow this humanoid robot trend, you know that Elon Musk is arguing for extremely large productive capability coming out of Tesla and the Optimus brand that he wants to produce. Meanwhile, we have like Figure AI, we have Boston Dynamics, I think it's called, and we also have another one called Digit that's being created here in Oregon. And I think there's, that one Neo that's being produced too. I don't think that one's produced in the United States though. Anyhow, the Western countries are lagging far behind China with regard to producing humanoid robots. I expect there will be an inflection, however, once Optimus starts rolling out production lines, where the United States catches up with what Unitree and China is doing. So essentially what we have is we have this interesting contradiction. We have robots, at least in the United States, that are performing like human beings with a hangover. Meanwhile, we have robots in China that are really performing some wondrous things, both in terms of art, dance, martial arts, and things like that, those demo type things. But more importantly, in the factories, they're actually producing products. They're manufacturing things with these humanoid robots. So it's interesting to note that we have tremendous progress happening right now around the world relative to these humanoid robots, even though you might not be aware that that's what's happening. And this is the thing with all manifestations. I would say 98% of what contributes to a manifestation you desire manifesting is happening behind the scenes. You can't know what it is going on that's assembling the cooperative components that enable you to realize a manifestation. And the same thing is true at the human species level. There are tremendous cooperative components coordinating to create this probable future reality in which we are living in this super abundant civilization. And it's really awesome that some people, myself and others, can perceive that, because we are holding the vision of that probable future reality that is all promise. And the people who are focusing on and holding the probable future reality where there's all peril, those people are contributing to the promise future, because whatever you resist persists I talked about that in a previous AI and Spirit episode. So the last story I want to talk about, and this is so good because this story happened in between the BMW story and the Unitree IPO. On August 10th, Bernie Sanders, the Democratic Socialist senator, sent out a letter. It was essentially a threat. He was confronting Sam Altman, Dario Amodei, Mark Zuckerberg with their own words. A couple months back, let's just say over the last 6 months, each of these people have suggested that we should pause artificial intelligence because they had their own misgivings or concerns about future development and the pace that things were being developed. But since then, they've kind of backed off from that, and they're looking at potentially coming together in some sort of a consortium similar to the consortium that China is putting together for countries in that part of the world. Bernie Sanders' letter basically tried to threaten the Frontier Lab CEOs with their own words. He basically said, you need to follow through on your promises to pause AI, and if you don't, we in Congress are going to do it. Now, this is really interesting, this letter that he sent. By the way, none of the Frontier Lab leaders responded to his letter, and I believe that was because they realized what I realize about this. So, Bernie Sanders is trying to capitalize on the tremendous fear that Americans have about the rise of artificial intelligence and humanoid robots. And there's a lot of fear out there, mostly because human beings in the United States tend to be pessimistic, and so they only see the half empty glass instead of the half full glass. And so Bernie Sanders knows this. And we're also coming into the primaries here in the United States, the primary elections. So this letter, while it seems like it's significant, it's much to do about nothing. He's pandering. He's playing to his base, but while he's doing so, he's amplifying the base, his voters' insecurity, and he's amplifying the vilification that already exists within some Americans about these Frontier Lab leaders. His letter is really much ado about nothing. And it's interesting because one of the things in his letter he says is, if you do not take appropriate action now, my colleagues and I in the US Senate will take action. It's really interesting because his party does not control the House nor the Senate here in the United States. They have no ability to leverage the US Senate to do anything. In fact, since the Republicans are in control of Congress, and since they're pro-business, it's highly unlikely anything that Bernie Sanders proposes is going to pass. And so really, his threat is empty. And that's probably why he didn't get any kind of response from any of the Frontier Lab leaders, because he's just blowing hot air. But it's really interesting because Bernie Sanders voters are going to see that, and they're going to double down on their own insecurity and on their own concern about AI, their misguided concerns about AI. Because remember, we're moving into a probable future reality where everything is going to unfold perfectly. It's going to be a beautiful unfolding. And I know this because it always is a beautiful unfolding. Nothing ever goes wrong. Even if you think it's going to go wrong, it doesn't go wrong. Oh, and if you believe it's going to go wrong, you'll get an environment, you'll get a reality that looks like things are going wrong, but that's going right because you're getting what you focus on. So if you don't want to end up in the future probable reality where things are going wrong on whatever subject it is you're thinking about, I suggest you change your thinking, and then seemingly like magic, it's not magic, but seemingly like magic, you'll end up in a probable future reality where everything's going right. And that's the case with all three of these stories. All three of these stories are illustrating both the promise of AI and humanoid robots, evidenced by Unitree's IPO, fantastic IPO, by BMW's doubling down on humanoid robots in their factory, the promise of AI, coupled with the contrast AI and humanoid robots are offering, which is evidenced by Bernie Sanders' hollow threat. It's so good. We are moving into a world where all of our desires are going to be easily fulfilled. Many of us are already in that world. My clients and I live in that world. All of our desires are being fulfilled. And I talk about how they're manifesting life experiences where all their desires are being fulfilled in my Worthiness Wednesday videos that come out every Wednesday. So we as a collective civilization, we're moving into a world, into a probable future reality where all of our desires will be easily fulfilled. But you don't have to wait until we move into that probable future reality to have that experience for yourself. You can start having that experience as soon as now. Want to know how? I suggest you become a client. I have links in the description of this video that allow you to take advantage of that opportunity. And in the meantime, this has been a great video. I expect I'm going to do more of these each week as the news comes out, charting the course to the probable future reality in which we're living in massive abundance. And for now, I'm complete. See you in the next video.